Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. A healthy attitude is a contagious, but don't wait to catch it from others. Be a carrier. There are different food groups which make a balanced diet. Today, the topic of my presentation is carbohydrates and fats. We discuss two groups. Learning outline of my presentation is introduction about carbohydrates and fats, function and type, recommended usage, problem caused by their excess or deficiency, recent update, and at the end there is an MCQ session. At the end of this presentation, participants would be able to describe about dietary importance of carbohydrates and fat, recommendations by WHO and recent updates. Carbohydrates are the major component of most plants. Plants make carbohydrate on their own through a photosynthesis. Carbohydrates are grains, fruit, vegetable, legumes, and sugar. And it is classified into two categories, simple and a complex carbohydrate. And simple carbohydrate then divided into two categories, single sugar and double sugar, monosaccharide, disaccharide, and a polysaccharide. Monosaccharides are the building block of complex carbs, and digestion convert all carbohydrates to a glucose. Carbohydrate is the main source of energy, spare protein from being burned so it can be used to build and repair. Dietary fiber can help lower the blood cholesterol, part of a connective tissue, some hormones, enzyme, and genetic material. Carbohydrates also help to digest protein and fats, fuel for central nervous system. Monosaccharides are again divided into different forms. Glucose, which is a body main source of energy, body converts other sugar into glucose for use by the body. It is frequently found in fruits and honey. Fructose is a sweetest natural sugar found in honey and a fruit. Galactose, not found alone in nature, linked to a glucose to make a galactose. And again, second category is a disaccharide. There are different forms of disaccharide, like sucrose, which is present in a cane sugar, combination of a glucose and a fructose, and a maltose does not occur in nature, and lactose naturally occur in a milk. Then comes the complex carbohydrate, which is also known as polysaccharide. There are two types of polysaccharides, animal and plant. Two forms of a plant polysaccharides are starch and a fiber. Starch is a complex carbohydrate and a fiber. Example is cellulose, gums, hemicellulose, and a pectin. And a starch made up of many glucose linked together, found only in plant foods, found in grains like wheat, corn, rice, rye, barley, and oats. Thicken liquids when heated. How carbohydrate metabolized in a body? Basically, there are four pathways which involve in a carbohydrate metabolism. First, each form of carbohydrate convert into a glucose 6-phosphate, and then in a process of glycolysis, there is a formation of pyruvic acid and lactic acid. And again, when a body needs a glucose, then there is a reverse of the glycolysis, which is known as gluconeogenesis, in which glucose is again formed, and glucose 6-phosphate is also converted into glycogen, and this process is known as glycogenesis. And with the help of glycogenolysis, again there is a breakdown of glycogen, and glucose 6-phosphate or glucose is formed when body needed the glucose. Then comes another form of a carbohydrate, which is also known as a fiber. Fiber is edible but not digestible. Fiber moves through the body unchanged. There are two categories of fiber, soluble or insoluble. Found in dried beans, peas, and lentils. Also found in peelings of fruits and vegetables. It is found in almost whole grains. And there are three parts of any grain: endosperm, bran, and germ. Endosperm contain almost 83%, bran 14%, and germ 3%. High fiber diet. Processing is a A grain that have milled and refined, removing the bran and germ, having a higher glycemic index than minimally processed whole grain. Physically formed, finely ground grain is more rapidly digested than coarsely ground grain. This is why eating whole grain in their whole form, like brown rice or oats, can be healthier than eating highly processed whole grain bread. High fiber food do not contain as much digestible carbohydrate, so it slows the rate of digestion and cause a more gradual and lower rise in blood sugar. Ripe fruit and vegetable tend to have higher glycemic index than unripened fruit. Fat content and acid content. Meals with fat or acid are converted more slowly into sugar. Fiber and disease. Fiber appears to lower the risk of developing various conditions, including heart disease, diabetes, diverticular disease, and constipation. Fiber beneficial role in the gut microbiome may produce anti-inflammatory effect that alleviate the chronic inflammation associated with these conditions like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, breast cancer, colorectal cancer, constipation, and diverticular disease. Some tips for increasing fiber diet. Eat whole fruits instead of drinking fruit juices. Replace white rice, bread, and pasta with minimally processed brown rice and other whole grains like barley, millet, amaranth, and farro. Add high fiber diets to a current meals, 1 to 2 tablespoons of almond, ground flaxseed, or chia seed, 2 cereals, diced vegetables, stir-fried dishes, and soup. For breakfast, choose cereals that have a whole grain as their first ingredient. Another tip is to look on the nutritional facts label and choose cereals with 20% or higher of the daily value for fiber. Snack on crunchy raw vegetables or a handful of almonds instead of chips and crackers. Substitute beans or legumes for meat 2 to 3 times a week in chili and soup. It is difficult to eat enough fiber through food. A fiber supplement such as psyllium or methyl cellulose powder or water can be used. They can help bulk and soften stools, so it is easier to pass. However, fiber supplements are not intended to completely replace high fiber food. Dietary recommendation for a fiber: 130 gram each day for children and adults. Women need at least 38 gram. In a fiber form, man needs at least 25 gram from fiber a day. 45 to 65% of our food should came from a carbohydrate. If we eat more carbohydrate than are needed for energy, the extra is stored in the liver or in the tissue as a fat. Consumption of a low fiber processed starches stimulate overproduction of insulin, which increase triglyceride and fat synthesis. Carbohydrates almost give 4 kilocal per gram energy to the body. Now we discuss the glycemic index. The glycemic index is a measure of how quickly a food causes our blood sugar level to rise. The measure ranks food on a scale of 0 to 100. Foods with a high glycemic index are quickly digested and absorbed, causing a rapid rise in a blood sugar. Low glycemic index foods lower passage of food into a small intestine fiber and a slow digestion rate. And glycemic load quantifies overall glycemic effect of a portion of food. These are different glycemic index food showing the low glycemic index food having a figure of less than 55, median glycemic index fall between 56 to 69, and high glycemic index of food is more than 70%. And there are different food groups and these numbers show their glycemic index. Low and high glycemic index. High glycemic index, basically a sugar in our blood reach almost 2 hours taken reach to in the blood. And some food high glycemic index and some are having a low glycemic index. Food with low glycemic index are better than those with a high glycemic index. In a balanced diet, protein should constitute 10 to 15% of total energy intake. Fat should constitute almost 15 to 30% of total daily energy intake, and carbohydrates rich in fiber should constitute the remaining of the energy. If there is an imbalance of a carbohydrate, then there are different diseases which are occurring, like diabetes. After food intake, blood glucose rise and is not regulated because insulin is inadequate. Hypoglycemia, blood glucose drop dramatically, too much insulin activity and any inadequate food intake or illness. Starvation, inadequate supply of carbohydrates, then a ketone body are an alternate energy. It is excess in amount and can lead to ketosis. And in the lactose intolerance, intestinal bacteria feed on undigested lactose, produce acid and gas. Lactose molecule attract water, cause bloating, abdominal discomfort, and diarrhea. Then comes another topic, which is fats, which is also called a lipid. Fats are the body main form of long-term energy storage. Large molecules made up of fatty acid and glycerol. Fatty acid are long chain of carbon atoms attached to hydrogen atom. Uses of fat. The energy which are obtained from a fat is 9 called gram, insulation beneath skin, sport padding for a organ, structural integrity of cell membrane, carry fat soluble vitamin, precursor of prostaglandin and vascular homeostasis, and make food more palatable. And this is the classification of fats. Simple lipids, major class of dietary lipid in adipose tissue, coconut oil, palm oil, cottonseed butter, or a margarine. And in a compound lipid, minor portion of a lipid in dine. Lecithin is most common important part of a cell membrane. And in a dry lipid, cholesterol, sex hormone, vitamin D. There are two categories, saturated fat and unsaturated fat. In a saturated fat, there is a no double bond, solid at room temperature, and it is animal in origin, like ghee, butter, cheese, meat, or fish. Unsaturated fat, there are a double bond present in unsaturated fat, usually liquid at room temperature. Trans fatty acid. Trans fatty acid are manufactured fat creating during a process called hydrogenation, which is aimed at stabilizing polyunsaturated oils to prevent them from becoming rancid and to keep them solid at room temperature. They may be particularly dangerous for heart health and may pose a risk for certain cancer. Hydrogenated fats are used in a stick margarine, fast food, commercial baked goods, and fried foods. What is essential fatty acid? Essential fatty acids are those that cannot be synthesized in human body. They can only be derived from the food. Two fatty acids are essential. Omega-3 fatty acid, which is known as alpha-linolenic acid. Omega-6 fatty acid, which is called linoleic acid. Essential fatty acid deficiency lead to phrenoderma. It is characterized by rough rash like eruption on the back and side of arms and leg and buttocks. It can be cured by giving linseed of safflower oil, which are rich in essential fatty acids. Safflower oil is the richest source of linoleic acid and it is most important essential fatty acid. And flaxseed oil is the richest source of linolenic acid. There are some healthy levels of different forms of a cholesterol, like total cholesterol less than 200, LDL cholesterol less than 100, and HDL cholesterol more than 60, and triglycerides less than 100 mg per dl. If there is a raised LDL and low HDL, then there are different harmful effects on the body, making the arteries more rigid, causing major clogs in the artery, creating insulin resistance, contribute to diabetes mellitus, significantly increase the chance of heart disease. Cholesterol HDL ratio should be less than 3.5. Reduction of fat intake in a body is almost 20 to 30% of our total energy intake, and the consumption of a saturated fat must be less than 10% of total energy intake. If there is a fat imbalance, then there are different harmful effects like obesity, phenoderma, tore skin due to deficiency of essential fatty acid, chronic heart disease, and a CA colon. Now it's time for the recent updates. There are WHO recommendation for a healthy diet. Total fat should not exceed 30% of total energy intake. Intake of saturated fat should be less than 10% of total energy intake, and intake of trans fatty acids less than 1% of total energy. Limiting intake free sugar to less than 10% of total energy intake, keeping salt intake to less than 5 grams per day, and the WHO member state have agreed to reduce the global population intake of salt by 30%. They have also agreed to halt the rise in diabetes and obesity in adults and adolescents as well as in childhood overweight by 2025. An anti-inflammatory diet is promoted as a remedy to battle inflammation in the body. So anti-inflammatory food is good for our body. There are different categories of anti-inflammatory foods like fruits, vegetable, high fiber, whole grain, legumes, monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated omega-3 fatty acids, tea, coffee, dark chocolate, herbs, spices, turmeric, and ginger. These all are good anti-inflammatory food. Some are inflammatory food which we can avoid because they have a bad effect on our health, like sweetened beverages, an excess of refined carbohydrate foods, fried foods, processed high fat meats like sausages or hot dogs, saturated fats like full fat dairy from cream and butter, partially hydrogenated oils, excess alcohol. This is one of the articles which show that omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids have a cardioprotective mechanism. Omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids such as decoxynipentanoic acid and decoxahexanoic acid are widely regarded as a cardioprotective. Dietary consumption of omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids is recommended in international guidelines for the general population to prevent the occurrence of cardiovascular diseases. This is one of the emerging field which is known as a precision nutrition. Precision nutrition may sound like a new fad diet, but it is actually a credible emerging area of a research supported by the National Institute of Health under the umbrella of precision medicine. Precision medicine seeks to improve the personalized treatment of a disease, and precision nutrition is specified to a dietary intake. Both develop intervention to prevent or treat a chronic diseases based on a person's unique characteristic like DNA, race, gender, health history, and a lifestyle habit. Now it's time for the MCQs. In our daily dietary intake, carbohydrates are the main source which provide calories. The percentage of our total calories obtained from carbohydrate should be between 15 to 20%, 20 to 35%, 50 to 65%, 5 to 10%, or 30 to 40%.
C.
C is the right answer, 50 to 65%. Different studies revealed that which of the following is a cardioprotective fatty acid: palmitic acid, stearic acid, omega-3 fatty acid, oleic acid, or trans fatty acid.
C.
C, omega-3 fatty acid is right option. 50-year-old man presented in OPD and gave history of taking diet which is rich in saturated fats. The man is at risk for which of the following condition: kidney failure, bulimia nervosa, anorexia nervosa, cardiovascular disease, marasmus.
D. Cardiovascular.
D, cardiovascular disease is right option. According to WHO recommendation, For healthy lifestyle, consumption of fats in our diet should not exceed 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, or 50%.
20%.
30%. C is the right answer. A man weighed 68 kg, consumed 325 gram carbohydrate, 65 gram protein, and 35 gram fat in his diet. The most applicable statement here is his total calorie intake is 3000. The proportion of protein, fats, and carbohydrate is correct. He has a negative nitrogen balance. Total energy intake is derived from fat. Total energy intake is derived from protein. B is the right answer. The proportion of protein, fat, and carbohydrate is correct. Following dietary changes are advised to reduce prevalence of coronary heart disease, except increase complex carbohydrate intake, saturated fat intake less than 20% of total energy intake, salt intake less than 5 gram per day, reduce fat intake to 20 to 30% of total energy intake.
D.
D is the correct statement because saturated fat intake less than 10% of total energy intake. Hydrogenation is a process which is used to convert fatty acid, and this type of fatty acid used in fried foods, donuts, margarine. Which type of fatty acid is this? Saturated fatty acid, polyunsaturated fatty acid, trans fatty acid, simple fatty acid, or essential fatty acid?
C.
C, this is trans fatty acid. An inflammatory diet is good remedy for battle inflammation in our body. Enlisted food items are good anti-inflammatory food except monounsaturated food, polyunsaturated food, legumes, coffee, or refined carbohydrates.
E.
E, refined carbohydrate is correct. Patient came to the nutritionist and complained of rough, rash-like eruption on the back and side of arms and leg, the back and the buttock. It can be cured by giving linseed of safflower oil, which are rich in essential fatty acid. He is most likely suffering from panoderma, scurvy, beriberi, pellagra, or scabies.
C or D?
A, panoderma. It is the deficiency of essential fatty acids. When we take food 2 hour, when we take food and it takes 2 hour, blood glucose response curve is obtained, and we categorize food in different index like high, medium, and low. This is known as glycemic index, glycemic load, glycemic curve, glycolysis, or a gluconeogenesis.
C.
A, glycemic index is a right answer. This is the three of my MCQs, and thank you.